I have a theory. The elements of this aren't new, but the theory goes like this. The bare minimum that a team needs to win the playoffs are these three elements. Number 1, goaltending. Number 2, special teams advantage. And number 3, a Norris caliber defenseman. So last year, I did a really rudimentary version of this, and I went 8 for 8 in the first round, a little less successful as the playoffs went on, mainly due to bracket matchup errors and being over-reliant on Shesterkin's ridiculous season, which showed I had Colorado and the Rangers in the finals, with the Rangers actually winning that because of Shesterkin's ridiculous season. So some errors were made, but we're trying to improve upon that this year. So this year we're taking the same theory, slightly different approach, and I'll be walking you through the matchups here in this video. This theory can't accurately predict how many games it will take. That's an area for improvement for this theory as I do this year over year. But for now, we'll have to make use of the data to make an educated guess. Now let's go back and see why I'm pointing out these three elements. So when you look back at the Stanley Cup winners going back almost 30 years, the Canadiens is a little bit cut off at the bottom, but nonetheless, almost 30 years of data here. What you see here is that power play versus special teams. When I initially did this analysis, I thought that a power play was important and that you needed to have a power play in order to win. Well, after doing the analysis, that's not the case. 15 of 30 teams did not have a power play above 20%, as you can see with these red cells right here. All throughout these, a bunch of these were taking place recently. These were, 2015, 16, all the way back to 2008, 2009. So this is not necessarily a pre or post lockout phenomenon. It's happened all throughout the last 30 years. But the special teams, this is the penalty kill percentage and the power play percentage put together. Anything over 100. Now, I also added 99.8s. They were above. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. 99.7, things like that. 99.9. We counted those as being around 100. But the rest of these, 98.2, 98.9, 94.6, this Devils team did not do well on the man advantage or killing penalties, and they didn't have great goaltending. So they kind of are an outlier in this regard. They did have Scott Stevens and Scott Niedermayer. So those are two Hall of Fame defensemen that maybe made up for that. And obviously they won with defense. But other than that, every other team on here had a special teams total above 100 or at 100. So that means that they're very good in terms of special teams because the playoffs are very difficult 5-on-5 to make an impact. Now, the other element here is the top defenseman. Only 2 teams on this entire list did not have a Norris caliber defenseman in the playoffs. This is Chris Letang. They obviously had Chris Letang in 16-17, but he was injured. So they were playing mainly 4 defensemen, relying heavily on guys like Olli Mata to get it done, and they did actually get it done. And then this 05-06 Hurricanes team with Caberlet, he was their best defenseman. Brett Hedman was the other defenseman that they had that was logging a lot of minutes. I would argue that this Hurricanes team should not have won the Cup. If Dwayne Roloson didn't get injured, it would have been Edmonton, and Chris Pronger would have been on this list, keeping the entire theory alive. But nonetheless, that is injuries, and injuries happen in the playoffs, so the Carolina Hurricanes won this Stanley Cup. And this is the other part of this that makes me think that they shouldn't have won. Cam Ward, .882 save percentage in the regular season. You'll remember he was a rookie that year. Marty Gerber actually played more of the games. He played about 62 games that year, and he had a .906 save percentage in the regular season, just above the .905 cutoff for these red cells. So, and in the playoffs, you see Cam Ward really improved his game, .920 save percentage. The other outlier on goaltending is down here, Mike Vernon in 97. He was not the starter in the regular season. They split. It was mainly Osgood doing a lot of the work in the regular season. He had a .910 in the regular season. But Mike Vernon in the playoffs, he became the old Mike Vernon that we saw in Calgary, .927 save percentage. So by and large, you need a goaltender who's putting up at least league average or better save percentage. You need this Norris Trophy defenseman, and you need the special teams advantage. So that's what we will be looking at in terms of each of these matchups. So let's get into the matchups and see how the teams are going to fare this year based on this theory. We'll start with my favorite team, the Rangers. There's going to be no bias in this because it's all data, but I do have the Rangers winning the series, and the reason is because of this. They do have the special teams advantage, 105.3, 104.5, barely. Their power play makes up for a little bit of that difference. Then you also have Dougie Hamilton outperforming Adam Fox. So Hamilton, the ratings here are based on the player ratings on the Data Draft Player Hub, which takes into account goals, assists, shots, power play points, hits, and blocks. So across all those categories, Dougie Hamilton averages 81.26, way better than Adam Fox, despite the fact that Fox, many people would think, would be a better, if not similar, defenseman in terms of his caliber. Then you get to the goaltending, and Shesterkin is better than Vanacek. There is pretty much consensus on that across the league. So this is the way it breaks down right now. This is going to go 7. This is the thought process here. These are very tight teams. The special teams is tight. The top defensemen, despite the fact that the numbers don't look tight, I think both teams have good defenses. The Devils are 3rd in the league in expected goals against. The Rangers are 12th. But when it comes to actual goals against, the Devils are 9th and the Rangers are 4th. And that's where that goaltending advantage comes in. And then goaltending is the X factor in the playoffs. And that's why I do believe the Rangers will pull it out in 7. It will be a very interesting series. It should be a lot of fun. If you're in this area, the metro area, this is something that you've been waiting for a long time. So excellent series coming up. I do have the Rangers, and I'm going to guess in 7 games. On to the other metro team, the New York Islanders and the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, this one, it's pretty cut and dry. The Hurricanes, way better special teams, 104.2. Their penalty kill is upper echelon in the league, top 3. The Islanders are also pretty good on the penalty kill. The Canes are 2nd. The Islanders are 9th. So you're getting pretty good defensive teams, pretty good penalty kill teams. The power plays are atrocious. The Canes are 20th in the league. The Islanders are 30th, which is amazing that they made the playoffs with the 30th ranked power play. In terms of defense, expected goals against, the Canes are 1st. The Isles are 16th. So that obviously favors the Canes. In actual goals against, the Canes are 2nd. The Isles are 5th. So you can see here the defensemen, there's not a lot separating these two guys, but the team defense is advantage Canes. But the goaltending is where that difference is made up with Sorokin, 86.17 on the goalie hub. He was top 5 on the goaltending hub, on the Data Draft goaltending hub for fantasy purposes. But this is also factoring in goals against, save percentage, goals saved above expected, and team expected goals against. So you're getting a little bit of everything in this number. And if you want a little bit more clarification, you can check out some of the other videos on my channel to see what the goalie hubs look like. But Sorokin, 3rd in the NHL in goals saved above expected. He's going to be the secret ingredient that's going to have to give the Islanders a chance. If he doesn't play out of his mind, then I don't see the Islanders having any chance of winning this series. I'll be picking the Canes in 6 games or less. Now up next, we have the Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now this one is a little bit surprising, and we will dive into this matchup a little bit deeper. So on the PK, the Leafs are 12th, the Lightning are 15th, pretty similar there. On the power play, the Leafs are 2nd in the league, the Lightning are 3rd. Both excellent power plays for obvious reasons, 26%, 25.4. But the Leafs do get the slight advantage for having a little bit better penalty kill and a slightly better power play, so they take the special teams advantage. Now when it comes to Norris defensemen, quote unquote, Sergachev actually outplayed Victor Hedman this year according to the rating system for fantasy purposes. Now again, you're looking at goals, assists, shots, power play points, hits, and blocks. And in those categories, Sergachev was better than Hedman. Hedman was not bad by any stretch. He was around a 77. So we'll take a look at this in more detail right now. So here's the player hubs, as you can see here. Hedman, 77. He just, Sergachev had a great year in terms of assists, 97th percentile, 95th percentile in terms of power play. In the first half of the year, Sergachev was the main power play quarterback, and people were messaging me all the time asking about Hedman. Is he going to return to form? And he did, but nonetheless, Sergachev did do some work on the power play. They both block shots. Sergachev hits slightly more, 1.62 hits per game. So either one of these defensemen are going to be better than Morgan Rielly, who is the top defenseman for Toronto. And I don't think it's any question that Victor Hedman is the number 1 defenseman in Tampa, and he is better than Morgan Rielly. So it's really semantics here, but I did want to highlight the incredible season Sergachev had and the fact that Hedman didn't really fall off after all. Now, in terms of goaltending, Samsonov actually scored higher than Vasilevskiy. Why is that? Well, As a team, the Leafs are much better defensively, as you can see on the far right bar. Team expected goals against per game. The Leafs were 73rd percentile, while the Lightning were 39th percentile. And I attribute that to the loss of Ryan McDonagh in the offseason. I do believe that hurt their overall defense. Chernak never really found another partner that he liked quite as much as McDonagh, and the data kind of reflects that. The Leafs were 12th in expected goals against. The Lightning were 19th in the regular season. In terms of actual goals against, we saw the figures earlier. This was the main difference between these two goaltenders. Now, Samsonov also posted slightly higher save percentage, while Vasilevskiy obviously had the higher goals saved above expected. He's an incredible goalie. We all know that. And we all know what Vasilevskiy can do in the playoffs, and we expect Vasilevskiy to be the better of the two goalies. But according to the data, which was admittedly compiled for fantasy purposes, there is reason to believe in both Samsonov and the Leafs. So getting back to the scoring, overall, you can see the Leafs take 2 of 3 categories, and I'll be choosing the Leafs in 6 or 7 games. I haven't decided yet which I'm going to put on my official bracket, but I do see them facing Boston in the second round. And speaking of Boston, let's take a look at the Bruins and the Panthers. Now, this should not come as any surprise. The Bruins are probably going to win this series. The penalty kill, Boston is first, Florida is 23rd. The power play, Boston is 12th, and Florida is actually 10th. So they actually do have a better power play slightly than what the Bruins have. So that is a little bit surprising to me, just given all the talent that Boston can throw out there on the power play. In terms of Norris caliber defensemen, I think if you look at the deeper analytics, everyone would say Charlie McAvoy is better than Brandon Montour. And I would agree with that assessment as well. The fantasy file that I had on both of these guys, Montour was the best defenseman on either team with 83.54. Again, you can check out the player hubs in the link in the description below to check out for yourself and see what went into that. I do think McAvoy is a better defenseman all around. But to be honest with you, the last couple weeks, McAvoy has not been the elite level defenseman that he was in the first half of the season. Nonetheless, defense, expected goals against, Boston 7th, Florida 25th. Actual goals against, Boston 1st, Florida 21st. So there's a huge defensive advantage despite the fact that this Norris defenseman, quote-unquote, category goes to the Panthers. And then with goaltending, it's pretty clear Ullmark was the best goaltender this year. He should win the Vezina almost unanimously. I will give a lot of credit to Juuse Saros for his 42-plus goals saved above expected season and basically keeping Nashville afloat. But nonetheless, Ullmark, the best goaltender this year, and Bobrovsky is the guy for me for Florida. He is better than Alex Lyon. He's 58.03. Alex Lyon 46.75 on the scale, despite a 19.13 change from April 3rd until April 14th. Alex Lyon went ballistic and got them into the playoffs, and that is worth noting, but I do think that they'll eventually return to Bobrovsky. Either way, I see Bruins in 5. On to the Western Conference, Avalanche Kraken. This is pretty much going to be the easiest one to predict, in my opinion. The Avs have the advantage in every category. So you can see the special teams, it's not even close. Cale Makar, if he's healthy, he is better than Vince Dunn by a wide margin. If he's not healthy, Bowen Byram, a 75.34 on the player hub. But the scales are tipped in favor of the Avs regardless. Avs 11th in expected goals against, the Kraken actually 8th. But the Kraken just don't get the goaltending. Avs are 8th in actual goals against. Kraken are 15th, and this is why Georgiev having a great season, top 5 goaltender in fantasy this year. Grubauer a lot lower, 57.07. He has improved a lot from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, and he is the better of the two. Martin Jones, 53.40. So he is slightly better. I do think they'll go with Grubauer, but nonetheless, this should be a relatively easy series for the Avalanche. All things considered, I have them winning in 4. On to the Stars and the Wild. This is going to be a very interesting defensive matchup. And if you look at the data and you see these green numbers, you're saying the Stars should win this pretty easily. But I don't necessarily see that being the case. The Stars, the penalty kill, Stars are 3rd, Wild are 10th, so they do have the advantage there. On the power play, the Stars are 5th, which is really impressive. The Wild are 15th, so they clearly have the special teams advantage. In terms of defensemen, Miro Heiskanen should be a Norris caliber defenseman. He hasn't necessarily been ranked in the top 3 of the Norris voting yet. That could happen this year. He's had an incredible season, but he's obviously the best defenseman in the series. Minnesota has a very good defensive core, but they don't have that one guy that they can roll out there 25 to 30 minutes a night and soak up all those minutes like Miro Heiskanen can. If you look at the raw numbers, John Klingberg is marginally ahead of Jared Spurgeon, 64.99. But just for me, there's no way that Spurgeon is not the number one defenseman, and Klingberg came over in the trade deadline. A lot of his rating was racked up with Anaheim, despite the fact that he's a humongous minus player, and I don't think he's very good defensively. When you get to the goaltending, this is going to be the duel of the ages. So you have Ottinger, one of the best goaltenders, top 3 in fantasy this year, 90.75. And then you have Philip Gustafsson, who just didn't get the start volume that Ottinger did. Otherwise, he might be closer to Ottinger in his rating. Now, the goaltending ratings also takes into account the amount of games that he starts. And in this regard, he did not start as much. It's been Fleury and Gus splitting. Fleury's a 68.58. I would imagine they'll start with Gustafsson and go back to Fleury if they have to. Despite the Stars having an advantage in every category, this should be a really defensive series that goes at least 6 games. I do think the Stars will edge it out, though, so I'll pick Stars in 6. Golden Knights, Jets. This is where we're going to get into a little bit of controversial topics. I think a lot of people think very highly of the Vegas Golden Knights and their defensive structure, and I do as well, but in every category, they are being outmatched by the Winnipeg Jets, and I don't really believe in the Jets. When your coach has to call out your top players just to get you into the playoffs, when you were leading the Central at one point in the season and you dropped off to a wild card spot, that's not good news. But nonetheless, the data is reflecting that the Jets are better in special teams. They have the better defenseman, despite the fact that Pietrangelo has won a cup and I would argue is on par with Josh Morrissey at the very least, if not better. On the year, this year, Josh Morrissey has had a much better season across all the categories that I mentioned before. In terms of team defense, you look at the penalty kill, Vegas 19th, Jets 6th, so a much better penalty kill. Neither team has a good power play, Vegas 18th, Jets 23rd in the league. In terms of defense, expected goals against, Vegas is 5th, Winnipeg is 15th. So that's where the Golden Knights defense should come into play. But the actual goals against, Vegas is 11th and Winnipeg is 10th. And a lot of that is due to Connor Hellebuck, 86.68 on the goalie hub. He's way better than anybody that the Golden Knights can throw out there. Brassois, 63.93. Jonathan Quick, 43.05. If Logan Thompson is healthy at any point, he's a 70.45. He would be their best option. But either way, they're going to get out-goaltended by Hellebuck if Hellebuck performs up to his standard. I'm predicting Jets in 5. The lack of home ice may indicate that Vegas holds serve at home, but nonetheless, the data is pointing to the Jets winning this matchup. Last but not least, Oilers-Kings. This should be a great matchup, a repeat of what we saw last year, and last year it went 7, and ultimately it came down to McDavid and Draisaitl. I believe that will be the case this time around. You look at the special teams, Oilers way better, mainly because of their 32.4% number 1 overall power play. Oilers are 20th in penalty kill, though. Kings are 24th, so they're not much better. The Kings also have a really good power play, and they are 4th in the league, but they are quite a bit behind the Oilers in terms of percentage, so the edge goes to the Oilers. In terms of defensemen, it's pretty close, but Drew Doughty is still the better defenseman of the two. You can make a case with Ekholm coming over that might be their best defensive defenseman. You could have to have that argument. In terms of the numbers, again, compiled for fantasy purposes, Darnell Nurse was the top defenseman for the Oilers. Lots of hits, lots of blocks, some offensive production as well. Then when it comes to goaltending, it's razor thin. Stuart Skinner, 75.97. Korpisalo, 74.60. Phoenix Copley, 70.75. So I do think they'll go with Korpisalo to start the series. And then if they have any trouble, they'll have no issue going to Phoenix Copley. But I do see the Oilers winning this in 7. The Kings would have done much better with a different matchup. This is not a good matchup for them because of the star power that they have to deal with. I think the Kings are a very good defensive team, and they are obviously a power play powerhouse. They have the 4th overall power play, but going up against that number 1 power play in the league is going to make the difference in this series, in my opinion. Now that brings us to the bracket. What does the bracket look like? Well, this is how it shakes out. just according to the matchup analysis that we just saw. So this is how it should look. Rangers, Canes in round 2. Bruins, Leafs in round 2. That would be an incredible series, especially if the Leafs obviously get past that first round for the first time in however many years. Colorado, Dallas, that should be a great series as well. And Dallas is one team that can actually beat Colorado. They for whatever reason, they have their number, historically speaking, going back 2 or 3 years. They are the one team that can beat Colorado. And then Oilers, Jets, that should be a really intense offensive series. So that should be really exciting for the league as a whole. But wait, there's one other thing that I wanted to touch on. If you take these raw numbers and you add them up, just total them, you'll get the strength of the team in general. These are what the raw totals look like, and the Islanders end up upsetting the Canes if you do it this way. The Devils actually beat the Rangers, and the Lightning hold off the Leafs, and everything else stays the same. So when you look at the bracket this way, this is how it shapes up. And could you imagine Devils Islanders in round 2? That would be an incredible matchup, just for the drama value being, again, Devils Rangers really close, Devils Islanders really close. The rivalry would grow from there. There haven't been too many Devils Islanders playoff series in the past. There's been maybe 2 or 3 that I can remember, but this would be an incredible series. Obviously, Tampa, Boston, they've seen each other in the playoffs before. They've had some incredible battles. But the reason I'm less favorable on this approach is because of what happened to my bracket last year. So the formula I used was similar, but without the player ratings I have now. I instead used save percentage for the goaltenders, and because of that, and because of Shesterkin's incredible regular season, I had the Rangers winning the cup against Colorado. And so that showed me that there was an over-reliance on one element of the formula. And in this case, the reason why the Devils beat the Rangers, they have, Dougie Hamilton versus Adam Fox. That gap is 8.45, while most people would say that Fox is the better defenseman, or at least the two are much closer than 8.45 difference. So this is an over-reliance on certain elements of that formula, which is why I'm not too high on this. But I just wanted to show this for the, imagine what would happen if these were the matchups. Now let's get to my final bracket, the one that ultimately uses the analysis and comes down to the Stanley Cup. And the way that it works out, again, using the same rating formula that we used in the first part of this video, the Rangers get past the Canes. That's their kryptonite, apparently, for the Canes. And I just think the Canes need a little bit more offense to be able to compete for the Stanley Cup. If they had Pacioretty, if they had Svech, they might be able to get past the Rangers. I do think the Rangers will beat them if they get there, but it will be a very tough series. The Canes are not an easy out. I do have, in my own mind, I have Toronto going to the finals. I'm sorry, not going to the finals, to the conference finals. But obviously the data is going to back up the Boston Bruins going to the conference finals, going to the Stanley Cup finals, and winning the cup. So the data suggests that Boston will win the Stanley Cup, at least the stuff that we're looking at right now. The interesting thing, Dallas does upset Colorado in this bracket, and Winnipeg upsets Edmonton, mainly because of Josh Morrissey being better than Darnell Nurse in that formula, and then Connor Hellebuck stealing the series, being the better goaltender over Stuart Skinner. So some really interesting stuff going on here. I don't think the Bruins will necessarily win the cup. I think it's too difficult to be that perfect for the entire season. But if you're interested, maybe I'll release my non-data oriented bracket on Instagram after this. But nonetheless, what do you think? How awful are these picks? Is there more to playoff success than special teams, a Norris defenseman, and goaltending? Let me know in the comments below. Don't be too ridiculous in the comments. I know that this is just an exercise. This is a hypothesis. This is not sitting here saying the data's right. It's 100% right. Just a fun little exercise that I'll track throughout the course of the playoffs. But thank you for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.